Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Time Extend. My name is Adam Ismail, and joining me today, as always, is...
Brendan Norrison, and we're trying to be a bit more up-to-date with this episode, aren't we, Adam? Rather than going back to a featured topic and discussing some old racing games, we've got a game that's coming out, well, this year, we know for sure, and another title that recently got announced, and we are especially psyched for it.
Yeah, so that's kind of what happens when there are actually new racing games we want to talk about, is we just put all the old stuff to the wayside, and they're like, we need to focus on this right now. And of course, one of them, as you can imagine, is Gran Turismo 7. We got to see that launch, or at least announced trailer at the PlayStation 5 event last week at the time we're recording this. And yeah, it was really cool because in addition to it being a good trailer, which we'll talk about, and getting us excited for the game, we weren't even sure that we'd see anything related to Gran Turismo. So just the appearance, just the presence of that franchise is enough, of course, to get everyone talking. And then after that, I was fortunate and lucky enough to play a preview build of Dirt 5. Shout out to Codemasters for hooking me up with that. And I just wrote my hands-on that's going to go live at the same time, around the same time that this episode will post, because the embargo for that is Monday. So if you're listening to this on Monday, happy Monday. And yeah, Brendan and I are gonna talk about Dirt 5 and what I think about so far. And spoiler alert, but it's pretty exciting. So between Gran Turismo and Dirt, I feel like we have enough to talk about.
Definitely. I think if we're looking for two modern games to talk about on Time Extend, I think a new Gran Turismo and a Dirt game that reignites some of the hype that the series might have lost in the mainline games. I think that's a perfect duo. So, I mean, obviously your Dirt 5 experience is going to be the most exciting part, but just to keep the people waiting, I think we talk about Gran Turismo 7 first, Adam, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, and of course we have the new art to go with it, which we're recording this on Saturday, and I just posted it today, and it has a pretty good reaction. So I hope GT fans enjoy that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Definitely one of my favourites so far. You always the fans seem to love it as well, but I'm also in the dark until I see the finished product, and I'm always extremely hyped when we do the 9th episode of one of our series, because it's like, oh, what's Adam got for us this time?
It's always like a combination of what can I faithfully recreate, but also what won't take the most amount of time. Because I wasn't going to try and draw or illustrate a time extend version of the iconic GT, because that was just going to be too time consuming, and I'm not really that good at Illustrator or Photoshop. So it was that's the GT4 prologue cover. I can do that. And I'll make sure to ham it up and put stupid signatures on it and all of the flavor text, because that's just part of the aesthetic. So yeah, it was fun to do, and I obsess over all the little details, even if it looks pretty bare bones at the end of the day. I'll just stare at over and over again. It's that kind of designer thing where it's v1.jpg, v2 final, v2 final. That just happens anytime I make anything. So, but
well, the final product looks fantastic, so it certainly works.
Yeah, thanks. But yeah, so Gran Turismo 7. I'm stoked. I know most people are stoked. Well, some people aren't, but there will always be some people who aren't. I just thought the trailer was interesting from the perspective of we don't usually see GT trailers at big events anymore. I feel like GT5 was the last time. GT6, had its own event, I think, at Silverstone, where that game was announced, the 15th anniversary one. GT Sport had that copper box thing. It might have had a trailer before then, but the trailer for GT Sport was very much based around looking at people play the game rather than the game itself.
It really was, yeah.
So to see a game-focused trailer, and not just that, and not just in the PS5 event that obviously everybody was watching, but for it to be the second game that they showed right after Spider-Man was pretty amazing. Yeah. And it also, in spite of that, in spite of where it was being shown, it wasn't a I wouldn't call it like a like mainstream kind of like broad strokes trailer for like anybody watching. Like they focus on the campaign mode for half of it. And, you know, the demo that they showed, the in-car gameplay was Trial Mountain. And before all of it started, you saw Kaz, who, you know, some random onlooker is going to see and be like, who's this guy? And Kaz like specifically mentions like the campaign mode is something I think that like, you know, diehard GT fans are going to love. So it was cool. I felt like he was talking to us.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, when he appeared so early on in the show as well, it was just, it felt like a blast from the past. Like Gran Turismo was at the forefront of the next PlayStation reveal. And then Kazunori's actual sentiments were actually directed not at the general audience like you've said, but at the fans. So it was like a best of both worlds type thing, where it almost felt as if Sony had realised that maybe giving Gran Turismo too much breathing space to do its own thing completely might have took it away from the public eye a little bit. So by bringing it back into this like cauldron of hype for the PS5, like everybody was in uproar about seeing this thing, seeing the games, putting a Gran Turismo out there, and then the message is immediately, we know what we've been missing, we know where we've been letting you down. Here it is, a fully fledged Gran Turismo experience that builds upon sport by the looks of it, but has a career mode that doesn't even harken back to GT6 or 5. We're going further back, Adam. We're going to the kind of GT3, GT4 stuff, yeah. Like the world maps, the general aesthetic. Even one of the things that I really liked, and notably there are people who seem annoyed by this, but the fact that there's like fictional brands that help with the tuning of the cars and stuff like that. So this is very much a lore-based Gran Turismo by the looks of it. In terms of like, there's a lot of world building going on from the brief clips we've seen, and it's so good to have that back.
Yeah, I mean, there's honestly more lore in this than I think have ever been in a Gran Turismo game. I mean, I guess maybe lore is the wrong word, but you're getting all these fictional brands, your understeer engineering and things like that, and you know, those were all introduced in sport, as anyone who plays sport knows. And I really don't know what the impetus behind that was. But, you know, it's cool to do that. One of the ones that always makes me laugh is there is a decal in the GT Sport livery either that says Grand Tourism. And I just think that's the funniest thing in the world for like a tour, a tours company or something like that, for a travel agency. So yeah, it's cool, and like you're saying, they're going back to GT4. You know, they're skipping GT5 and 6. And as someone who really did not enjoy the PS3 gen, you know, really at all, I never go back to GT5 and 6. I actually don't even own GT5 anymore. I sold it at some point. I really don't know why, but like, it's also one of those things, like, to try and go back and play those games. Like, I have a limited amount of space on that PS3 hard drive, and like, I think what was that when I was going to install GT6, I knew I couldn't have GT5 on it too. I just didn't have enough room for that, and Ridge Racer 7, and Dirt 3, and a bunch of other games. So yeah, those games are hard to go back to. And it's funny because like, I was kind of I was browsing through GT Planet to see some of the reaction, particularly to like the the world map. And it's funny because like, you see some people kind of complaining about, longtime fans who have been like on that site forever, kind of complaining about like, we didn't need like the cursor and the map again, you know, it's unnecessary. Like, can you just give us like a normal menu? And I don't know, I don't really understand that take. Like, okay, see, if you've been playing the game a long enough time, you know how to get around Gran Turismo. It's not that complicated. You know, I could see it being off-putting to a newcomer. If you are a newcomer, you know, that sucks, but I don't think it'll take you too long to get the hang of it. I mean, certainly we were able to get the hang of it when we were kids. And like, in GT2, it was particularly complicated because you had the North City and the South City, and that was kind of annoying. So you don't have anything that's like that seems to be like that sort of obtuse to a new player, at least in this game from what we've seen. And I think it's just part of the atmosphere, you know? I think, like, look, could you do like a standard like list of menu items instead of like a map with like icons that looks like a miniature world? Sure. But that's the whole argument about art. It's like you don't really need to do these things that look like elaborate and complicated, or like not even complicated, but like very stylistic. Like none of these things are necessary. We just do them because they look cool. And I think like that's okay. Like I don't know. I'm really excited to see those things returning. So I kind of get surprised when some people who have like really enjoyed the series over the years don't really like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that probably comes from the fact that there are so many kind of series that take place in that simulation environment now. So back in the day, Gran Turismo was the king. It still is for many. But there's a lot of contenders now that we've talked about this before that basically strip away the game element and just leave a sandbox of content that can be easily picked and chose and put together, and then you can race. But I think that because titles like that are so prevalent, I think a proper Gran Turismo with a real career is needed more than ever. That's why I'm particularly excited about it. If we're looking at it, then if you want to get technical, then yeah, I guess in terms of that trailer, there isn't really anything incredibly new there. But I feel like as Gran Turismo fans, it's not. It's just that return to that type of gameplay format we know Polyphony shine in. Like you said, like those menus might be a bit obtuse at times and they might be difficult to navigate, but it just builds up the overall atmosphere of the game, because basically you're getting invested in this Gran Turismo world. You're kind of giving it the time of day outside of the racing track itself, and I think that's where Gran Turismo's always shined. Whenever I play any other racing game, I don't really care about the menus or getting through those. In Gran Turismo, I always feel it's the opposite, that you'll spend a lot of time buying a car, modifying it, getting it to the standard you think that it'll be able to compete at, realising it's still lacking some elements. You go back, you maybe sell a car that you own to see if you can buy further performance parts. There's that whole car PG element, as it's referred to, that Gran Turismo has, and that was not thriving in the PS3 era. That was the issue. So Gran Turismo 7 almost seems to acknowledge that by kind of peeling back the layers a bit. Some people have called it nostalgia baiting. I see it more playing to your strengths. Polyphony know how to make this type of game, so I think it's actually a positive that they've realised they maybe got lost, especially in Gran Turismo 5, for example, with the car count stuff, getting as many licenses to misuse as possible. Gran Turismo 6, more of a streamlining it too much and removing a lot of the identity, but still leaving a good experience in there. GT7 and Lineage, like we're saying, it seems more attached to GT3 and 4, and I think the core Gran Turismo audience that want a Gran Turismo experience, not necessarily a great racing game experience, they're going to love it.
Yeah, I think playing to your strengths is kind of the main thing to focus on here, because I see it as the same way too. I mean, look, this game could very well be, you know, essentially like GT4 on top of the GT Sport engine. And I understand, like, people complaining that, like, that's not really new. But it kind of reminds me, it's something I said last show, and I've said a lot related to Need for Speed Heat, which is, I know, a game that a lot of people have mixed opinions on, but I really enjoyed. Once it's been a long enough time, you go back and you play a game like that, and you remember, like, this is really what I've missed. Like, there's just something about this formula that works. And maybe it's not so much about turning the formula upside down, but just making tweaks here and there. Like, you know, anyone who's played GT1 through GT6 knows that, like, even, you know, you look at GT1, GT2, GT3, GT4, those games are probably the most similar overall. They have the most kind of, in terms of their organization, in terms of their UI, in terms of their layout, those are like the legacy kind of Gran Turismo games that like established the way that the series works. And even though they were kind of reusing that formula, there were little tweaks here and there every single time. You know, like, for example, with GT3, you had that, GT1 through 3 had that classic arcade mode, and you just played through the GT3 arcade mode a couple weeks ago on Twitch, and that was fun to watch. I've been playing a lot of GT4 lately, and they got rid of that in GT4. It's something I didn't even realize, but it was missing from GT4. But GT4 had like the missions that GT3 didn't have.
It did.
And, GT3 got rid of the used car dealership and GT4 brought it back. And then GT2 and GT1 had the used car dealerships, but they were in the manufacturer. So, like, they make little tweaks as Formula every single time. And I think what people don't realize is that they have massive knock-on effects on everything else in the game. Like GT5 had that leveling system. And the leveling system I really didn't like, but... it dictated how you progress through the game, and also like all of a sudden like the level mattered more than like say your driver licenses, because GT5 had a license school, but like you didn't actually have to do it to play the game. So like I think that this is a series that really, some series do this. They luck out because they settle upon a really good formula. And Gran Turismo created the CarPG formula. There were a couple games beforehand that had money. We were recently talking about this in the Discord. There were games before that had credits and, cars you could buy and modify. But Gran Turismo was the one that cemented the formula. And I think it worked so well at the time because I don't think it's just a simple fact of like a CarPG where you buy cars and you tune them up. I think it's more... the pacing of the game. I went through and I played GT1 recently, and it is a really hard game. Like, I forgot how hard it is, especially out of the bat. It's absolutely brutal. But, one of the things that we've often talked about related to, like, modern racing games is how, like, sometimes things don't feel earned, and you earn every single thing that happens in Gran Turismo 1 and 2. You just do. Like, you have to grind. And I get that some people might not like that, but, I think there's something intangible about this series between kind of the scaling of all those respective factors and how it creates a cohesive whole, that just the way that Polyphony approaches it always seems to work. And GT5 and 6 had those missteps, and Sport really foregoed that entirely. Which in retrospect was a pretty clever move because it just allowed them to create a base for a future, which was something that they were never really able to do for GT5 and 6. So now that, we had a 7-year stretch where we had Sport and nothing else, Sport, GT6 came out in 2013, and since that time we've only had Sport for like half that time for some of those years. But it's allowed them to come back, and now that they have the base, now that they have a large roster of cars, it's only going to keep growing. Now they can concentrate on all the other stuff, because the thing is, like, game development today is not what it was in 2004. It's not what it was in 1998. Like, these games take time, and, even a developer like Polyphony, is not just going to bring the GT6 model of Trial Mountain back. We saw the way that this track now looks in the trailer, and they have such a laser-focused attention to detail with every single thing that they were like, well, it's been 20 years. Like, we have to reinvigorate the track because, we have the FIA thing going on, and we need all this like room for 20 cars and so on. So, like... yeah, I don't know. I mean, all of that is rambling, and I will shut up now. But just basically, like, to combine a lot of the attention to detail and stuff that was on display with Sport, with the classic approach of the previous games. If GT7 does that, and it looks like it will, that is all I can ask for.
Yeah, exactly, and that was my sentiment as well. I put out a tweet after the announcement the day after, and I think what we've got here is, like you said, Sport is very much the base for this. I think we don't know this for sure, but based on the way the game looks when you're actually in gameplay, there's no doubt that this is running a very, very close spec of Sport as we've seen it, with the added kind of ray tracing and all the newfangled tech that the PS5 brings. But you can tell that's the base they built off of, more so as well because the multiplayer mode is literally called Sport mode by the looks of it. I wouldn't be surprised if what we have in Sport as the main online multiplayer component is just carried into Gran Turismo 7, because why wouldn't it? Like that's been a huge success. I think Gran Turismo 7, if it's trying to meet the release window that we're hopeful it will and release by the end of 2021, then I think it makes sense to basically have all you've done in sport and all the changes you've made there and all the refinements in the mode within the game, and then you actually have a dedicated career component as well, which they can dedicate their time to. Naturally, when people have been looking at the gameplay so far, they've been trying to analyse the actual on-track experience from a single-player perspective. And all cards on the table, I don't think we're going to see any sort of revolutionary racing when it comes to the AI stuff. I think Polyphony know that Gran Turismo as an experience isn't just about the on-track overtakes and that type of thing. If anything, that's never really been what made it a fantastic series. I think that they focused more on making a Gran Turismo experience on the car PG side of things, on the new sport mode where people can get that competition if they want it. I think the career mode in GT7 will hopefully try and tick all the boxes that the games previously had forgotten about, and still make it so the on-track driving is fun as hell. I just don't think from an AI perspective or from the way the career's structured, it's not going to be that revolution that some people think is easy to come across. That's the other thing. Like, I keep seeing people saying, oh, they're not innovating, they're not actually trying to kind of change the formula. But like you said, is it worth just changing the formula for the sake of it? Otherwise you end up with a leveling system that directly contradicts the licensing system that you've only included because people would go crazy if it wasn't there. I feel as if, like we're saying, this is a play to your strengths. Hit it off with a bang. For too long now, Polyphony seemed to be behind on the curve in terms of the development cycle, getting the Gran Turismo games out, which is why it worked out for Sport in the end, because they just had one game and they added to it over time and it got great. I think with the PlayStation 5, they've got the real chance, because these things are so powerful, to get back to the 2-game cycle. So I think GT7 will be the necessary expansion on Sport to add a fully fledged career structure and that type of thing. But I don't think it's going to be like when they announced Gran Turismo 6, for example, and all they focused on in that introductory trailer was like the new tyre model, like the new kind of intricacies in the physics and that type of thing. Maybe I'll be proved wrong. I don't think we're going to see too much different from Sport, and that's absolutely fine because Sport drives fantastically, and I'll take more of that any day of the week.
Yeah, Sport. I would be perfectly happy if the handling was unchanged from Sport. You know, there are a couple things here and there that I think could always be improved, but I love the way that game drives. I've always loved the way it drives. For me, I would like to see a step up in the quality of the AI and in the positioning of the AI during races against the AI. You know, it's I think for a game like Sport, you can almost excuse it, because it's not so much campaign based, but like I was saying, I was playing through GT1 and that game is hard as hell. And I've been playing a little bit of GT4 lately and doing some of those missions and God, like those one lap magic ones and stuff that I could never figure out. You know, that's a level of difficulty. I don't know if we need to go back to quite that, but I think it's something we've talked about before. Just like sometimes those really, really hard events, you don't want every event to be that hard, but sometimes those legendary events, they just like have this sort of, they take on a life of their own. They take on a legend of their own. And I think that's just something that like has really been missing from Gran Turismo over the last 3 or so titles. You know, I would like to see a step up in the difficulty. I would also like to see the difficulty become more of a gradual thing. You know, the early races can be like the ones in Sport, that's fine, but once you get to the intermediate events or the advanced events or the endurance events, like step up the difficulty. Wheel-to-wheel racing is something that would be nice to have in Gran Turismo again, even if in the earlier games it was more of just kind of a catch-up type thing, of a rubber banding. It's just nice to get that, and that's something that I've missed from Sport. But I think Polyphony's attitude toward that is like, well, if you want that, then race against real people, which we are more than happy to have you do, and have created this great foundation upon like pushing you to do that and pushing you to hone your skills and go online. But I don't think they really see the value in AI as much as everyone else does, and that's disappointing. But we'll know for sure once the game comes out.
Yeah, we will, and that's where the niggling feeling about what I was talking about comes into play, because the fact that they are taking sport mode across, seemingly, that would imply to me, like you're saying, the answer to that question of how close is the racing going to be will be, well, how much do you want to play online? And like you said, it's a bit of a shame, because when I was playing through Gran Turismo 3 recently in the arcade mode, there's some genuinely good racing going on there, and I don't know if they're doing like slight rubber banding or anything. To be honest, against the AI, as long as it isn't like bullshit like scam artist stuff, I don't mind a little bit of trickery on the AI side of things to make it interesting. The biggest issue was in the PS3 era, especially, the only way you could make those races interesting were by driving slower cars, and even then, it's not because the AI was capable of great overtakes and that type of thing if you were in an underpowered vehicle. It was literally just because you'd have a slower car than everyone else. The actual abilities of the AI were pretty average
Right.
and Sunday driver-esque, and I think that I don't want to be a pessimist on this one. I've just got a feeling it's kind of to be expected at this point from Polyphony. Like, they might not spend a lot of time in that department, especially like you're saying, they've spent so much investment in sport that they'll feel that's where the close racing is, which is a shame, because I think the reason, like you're saying, about those kind of events that you remember, the showcase events, there wasn't really any of those in GT5 or GT6, and the closest to that in those games were the ones that were harkening back to previous events that were actually difficult, even ones that are close to that. So
Yeah.
I think it's. I do hope I'm wrong, and maybe there are improvements in that area, and who knows how old that footage they were showing was in the race. But I think at the moment, it's sort of the same argument that frequently goes on with the Pokemon series as well. Like, that's, people say that's stagnant because they don't really make many changes, but they know what they're good at and they stick to it. I think for this title especially, Polyphony would benefit from knowing their scope, executing a great Gran Turismo 7, and then who knows, maybe AI improvements will follow. I really hope I'm wrong, and GT7 has phenomenal offline racing. I'm just kind of curbing my expectations a little bit, because I know how hard it must be for them to go back to that style of career mode they're delivering after not nailing it for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm hopeful, but like you, it's something that doesn't look good given the current situation. But that's the thing. Like, I never knew after sport if we'd ever see like an old style Gran Turismo again. It looks like that's what we're going to get.
Exactly.
So anything is possible. Something I wanted to talk about before we move on from Gran Turismo is, some of that trailer was just racing on the new Trial Mountain, and I thought it looked great. Obviously, it looked a lot like GT Sport. It's basically the GT Sport engine, but you have the ray tracing, and it looked really good. But the track itself has generated a lot of conversation among fans because they've made so many changes. So you have that front straight, which I think Andrew Evans, who was on our Gran Turismo episode earlier, he did a deep dive on GT Planet into the differences between the new track and the old track, and it's a good read. Everyone should go take a look at it. And I think he said that the new front straight is more than 2 times longer than the original. And the back straight is longer in kind as well. And anybody who remembers Trial Mountain knows that the track starts out, you have those S's, and then you kind of have that arc that goes into the tunnel, which is kind of a long left-hander. And that has been made from it was never a consistent radius, but it was more of like an ongoing corner. They've basically changed it, so now the end of the S's is like a hard corner. You have a very short straight, and then you have another corner in the tunnel. So there have been changes made. It looks like they widen like the middle sector, and some people seem to be disappointed. I can understand that. Some people are like, oh, I know why they did it, but it'd be cool if they had like a Trial Mountain 90s. And look, I mean, I would love that too, but I don't think that that's likely. Because I don't even see them making multiple models of existing tracks. Real world tracks. So I don't expect to see them make multiple fake ones. But yeah, I think it's cool, and it's actually kind of funny because like if you're watching the trailer closely, there's a race in the campaign mode in the kind of little demo clip that they show where somebody's going to do like the FR challenge or something like that at Trial Mountain. And it says, we have those new guides, Sarah being one of them, which is kind of funny. And she goes, this is Trial Mountain. This track has a long history, but I hear it's recently been renovated. And I just think that's so cool. Like that lens, that is total like Ridge Racer lore to me. It's one of those like really cool little callbacks. And people have kind of tried to look really deeply into some of those thumbnails that they have on those screens. It looks like Deep Forest might be one of the tracks. It looks like Grand Valley might be another one. It's kind of too early to tell because they all look sort of samey, and they might just be placeholder images. But look, we get Trial Mountain, Deep Forest, Grand Valley. I'm set. I mean, that would be really great. And I'm actually excited to give the new track a go, even if they killed the deadliest corner in all of motor racing. with that last one.
I think as well, like, the fictional circuits just play into the whole world building of Gran Turismo as well, so it's good to see that they're through Sarah and Rupert as well in the tuning shop. Maybe even in the races we might have a rival or something like that as well that hasn't been revealed yet. Maybe they'll go down that route. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of incrementally enhance the experience overall beyond, like, obviously a guy like Rupert is just there to tell you tutorial based stuff, but like Sarah's little bit of lore that she drops on the trailer, like I'm here for that shit. Like I'm really excited to see what kind of stuff they talk about with Deep Forest and the like.
Yeah, and I think Andrew also pointed out that if you've been to a GT Sport FIA event, which I was lucky enough to go to last year, you may have seen Rupert. So, and I totally didn't realize that, but yeah, I believe Rupert is a Polyphony employee. And wow. I would only assume that the same is true of Sarah, because I knew there was something familiar looking about Rupert. I must have seen him in New York, but that's pretty cool.
That's cool.
I think that's kind of a little cute thing to include in there, especially because like Polyphony. I've been watching like more and more interviews with Kaz and stuff recently over the years, and one thing he makes clear is that like, look, the people who have been making Gran Turismo have been making Gran Turismo since Gran Turismo started, and like we hire some new people every now and then, but like the core team is the same as the core team's always been. And I think it seems like in Japanese development culture, game development culture, as well as in just Polyphony's own separate culture, like that kind of family mentality seems to be an important one that they carry through. There isn't a lot of turnover with that staff, so that it just seems like it fits. It just seems like a cool thing to do.
I just want Jay Leno to come back.
Yes, everyone's favorite Polyphony Digital employee, Jay Leno.
Oh man, I still think about Jordan from GT Planet's impression that he did on one of the podcast episodes.
Start!
Perfect. But I guess Gran Turismo 7 then, any closing comments, or are we going to be moving on?
I think we can move on. I guess we could just leave it with, when do we think we're actually going to get this game? And I think it's funny, you said end of 2021. That to me is like a worst case scenario. I'm going to be hopeful and say spring 2021. Spring to summer. So maybe now would be the tail end of when we could expect the game in my estimation. And the only reason I'm saying that is because like I think the game might be further along than we realize. And I also feel like they wouldn't have shown it off now if it wasn't like a solid 2021 title. And if you ask me, like, if Polyphony says the game is going to come out at the end of 2021, it's not coming out until 2022. But if they say it's going to come out in like spring 2021, then it'll actually probably come out before the year is over. So
here's hoping. I don't want to be waiting too long for I'm ready for a proper Gran Turismo game. In terms of the PS5 itself, I'll probably be waiting until we have that kind of concrete release window before buying one. I think the presentation as a whole was pretty cool, but in terms of like games that interested me, it's very much still following that kind of Sony kind of drive at the moment, but Gran Turismo being a part of that is a huge positive. So I'll be picking up a PS5 as soon as I seen that. I was like, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, to be brutally honest, like the Xbox Series X, I think, has more of what's going on in terms of the hardware and the approach that Microsoft is taking. They're doing really smart things with smart delivery and backwards compatibility and everything. I like their strategy more. I think they're being smarter about this whole next generation thing than Sony is.
Yeah.
But PS5 is Gran Turismo, and it's really that simple. It's just that simple, folks.
Yeah. So. Until Forza shows us what they've been working on the motorsport side of things, then GT's king, and it will be for the foreseeable.
There's still much more to talk about, obviously. Dirt 5. So yeah, I like the game. I like what I've played of it so far. I think it's going to be interesting. Yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting. I think you and I are going to love it, and I think some people are going to be wishing that it continued along the path of Dirt 3. There is an interesting kind of trajectory that Codemaster seems to be following with this game, where, you know, it was part of this Q&A session on Discord, and I believe it might have been Robert Karp, who's one of the lead developers on the game, and he was saying that, you know, internally we say that Dirt 2, like they literally had a graphic for this in their presentation. It was like, internally we say that if you combine Dirt 2 plus Dirt 3, you get Dirt 5. And not only does it mathematically make sense, but that's kind of the vibe that we're going for, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with this game. I think it fits because the biggest issue that Dirt 4 had was it was too similar to Dirt Rally while not capitalizing on the things that people who love Dirt Rally love about Dirt Rally. And there is going to be absolutely no mistaking Dirt 5 for Dirt Rally. So I think off the bat, Codemasters has succeeded with that. I think the other reason that the game really works well is because Codemasters has had this problem for a long time, dating back to like sort of the 360 PS3 generation, where they kind of have that one engine. And so like whether you're playing Dirt or Grid back in the day, Dirt 2 or Grid 2, the games kind of always felt very similar. They just always just had that quintessential handling. There's something about like when I go back and play Grid Autosport on the Switch, for example, where I'm just like, this just feels so much of the times and of the games that Codemasters was making that there's like almost nothing really distinguishable about it. But what Dirt 5 really benefits from is the fact that it's developed by a different team, which is the Cheshire team, which was Cody's Evo, which made Onrush, and of course before that was Evolution Studios, which made Drive Club and Motorstorm. And the engine they're using is their own tech. It has nothing to do with Dirt Rally. It has nothing to do with Ego. It has nothing to do with F1 or Grid. And it's so much more of a unique thing with its own identity because of that. I can't even begin to tell you. This does not feel at all like anything else that Codemasters has put out except for Onrush. And depending on who you are, that's either going to be great. It's music to our ears.
Yeah.
Or not. But I really enjoyed it, and it just hit kind of all of the right like arcadey off-road racer notes to me.
See, that is really interesting and also great to hear, because when you go with the numbered title, so Dirt 5, people will expect something iterative. But the thing is, with 4, like you've said, I always refer to it as the racing game equivalent to porridge or oatmeal, depending on where you're from, in the sense that that game just felt very lifeless at times. Like, it didn't really have an identity. It really wanted to capture that rally audience like we talked about, but it still wanted to have the kind of dirt attitude, and it just kind of left it feeling a bit cheap. Right away from 5, I could see there was a different approach, but hearing that it's so severe that it almost shares nothing in common with other Codemasters titles, and yet they're that confident they're still calling it Dirt 5, I'd say that's exactly what I wanted to hear, because I feel as if Dirt Rally is so close to what was the initial iterations of the regular Dirt series, there had to be a change up. And getting that team on it, and the comparisons to Onrush especially, given how off the wall that is, it seems like, just from your initial comments, man, like they've really went in on trying to create something that doesn't really exist in the current marketplace anyway.
Yeah, what I love about it is like there's, something that this show concerns a lot is this, that we try to combat, is this idea that arcade racers are intrinsically less interesting or less methodical, or that less thought goes into them compared to sim racers, because there's that ongoing debate. It's not even a debate, but there's those like camps in this genre that are honestly annoying to us because we enjoy all of it on both sides.
Yeah.
And I think Dirt 5 is great because nobody could ever say, like, in spite of the fact that the physics are more arcadey, much more arcade compared to Dirt Rally, and more arcadey compared to Dirt 3 or Dirt 2, no one could ever say that this game has less going on from a technical standpoint than those other games, because the weather effects in this are, we saw what Evolution did with Drive Club. We saw what Evolution did with Onrush again. And it's just more of that now, except even more just dynamic and all-encompassing, because now they're using the technology of next generation platforms, and these new PC cards and stuff that have come out, and so like the weather effects in this game are astounding. Like, even this beta I played is 4 months out, and there are some glitches here and there, but it's a beta. What do you expect? But the weather effects are already so perfect. It's just really astonishing. Like, they have this one track in Norway, and the demo has 4 events, and this is one of the events, and you're driving 90s rally cars. And part of the beta is that these are single races, but every time you go to do the same event even over and over again, you'll kind of go through a cycle. So the first time will be like a rather kind of static, sunny race, and then the next time you do it, you'll get this race where it's only a 3-lap race, but it starts out, it's kind of dusk, and then the clouds start to roll in, and then the snow starts to fall, and then it's nighttime, and then you can't see. And like, it's just, anyone who's played Drive Club knows that feeling, and it's one of the coolest things about that game, that no developer ever really tried to do weather effects anywhere near as well.
Yeah.
And Cheshire, they're just so good at it, and they've done it again with Dirt 5, and I don't know, it's just breathtaking, and you have those same kind of beautiful locales and vistas. There were some moments. There's one track in Brazil where I was racing it's kind of rally raid vehicles that reminded me a lot of some corners on some of the India stages in Drive Club, and some like really kind of amazing sort of elevation changes and things in that track as well that reminded me a lot of MotorStorm and Onrush. And so it really seems like this is a case where the studio is pulling everything together to make, a more, I guess you could say, a more grounded rally title, but still really, still really leaving an impression when it comes to things like the weather effects and the vistas and just the graphics, because it's just a beautiful game in general.
I mean, that just sounds like the like Drive Club Rally DLC we never got. Like, just the way you're describing it, it sounds very similar in terms of the how well blown away will be the first time we experience those effects, because the fact that you sound so moved by it despite already seeing this tech in other games as well, man, like that sounds like a mad positive. So yeah, the thing about weather effects are, I don't think we realise how important they are or how much they have an impact on games that we like until we see them at their best. And Drive Club was definitely an example where it was like actually putting in the perspective of, if this type of fidelity and this type of dynamic element is possible, if a game is at 30 frames per second, I would consider that. And Dirt 5 is also 60, isn't it? It runs at 60 frames as well.
Yeah, so Dirt 5 is going to be 4K 60 on the next-gen platforms. I don't know what they're targeting for the current ones. Who knows? Maybe it'll be an Onrush type situation where you can choose between 30 and 60. But we saw how Onrush, we saw how Onrush looked at 60. Honestly, at 60 frames, that game looked almost just as good from a graphical fidelity standpoint as it did at 30. And you wanted once you played the game in 60. Like, I'm not someone who is like, you know, a frame rate obsessed person that every single racing game needs to be 60 frames per second. But Onrush is one of those games where, like, once you play it in 60, you're like, I don't want to play this in 30. It's just too smooth. And, like, you know, I think Dirt 5 is going to be the same. But we don't, you know, they didn't say anything about what it's going to do on current gen platforms. But on next gen platforms, you're going to get 4K 60. And not only that, on Xbox Series X, you're going to get a 120 option. I'm assuming that's not 4K. I'm assuming that's full HD. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
Right. That is really cool, and it ties into like Xbox's strategy as well, like we were talking about earlier, funnily enough, where they've even started talking about like some of their backwards compatible games might end up getting a 120 frames bump at some point. So the fact that Dirt 5 is going to be able to come out on this console and like show off that feature right away, that is interesting, because I didn't think consoles would ever prioritise anything over 60, because 30 is still very much the norm. But not to get lost in a different argument, in terms of Dirt 5, I think if it looks as good as you're saying, and from gameplay footage it certainly looks that way, I would not be bored in the slightest playing this at 30 if you had all those dynamic effects and weather going on, because that's an arcade racing title needs that visual flair, and nobody knows that better than the Ex-Evo stuff.
Yeah, and on top of that, you also get the different seasons like you did in Onrush. So you'll go back to a track, you'll be driving in a different season. You know, all of the technology that they have built over the last several years, over the last, you know, getting close to probably a decade now since they started work on Drive Club, is present here, and it really shows. And this is a great engine, and like the Cheshire team, you know, I was saying this recently, I think you know, hit for hit, they're maybe my favorite dev working right now, because from Motorstorm to Drive Club to Onrush, even times like with Onrush and Motorstorm, I was never the biggest fan in the world, but those games were still addictive, and there was something special about those games, and I don't think there's really many developers you can say that about. And so I have a lot of confidence in this team, and you know, from what I've played, they're doing everything they should be doing. I think what's going to make or break this for some people are going to be the physics, and I like where they're at now, and they might be tuned further. I mean, you know, there's still some more time. Codemasters is very, you know, they'd like me to say, and I'm not just saying it because they like me to say, but the game is early on still. So, you know, there can be lots of changes made still, especially because, like, you know, all the main pieces are there, but, you know, the snow in the beta I was playing is kind of overpowered, they say, so it slows you down too much. So that's something that they are going to address, you know, before the final version comes out. So all these things can change, but I like the physics. The thing about the physics is that I think people, however they imagine a game like this should handle, they should go back and play Dirt 2 or Dirt 3 first, because I recently did that well before I played the Dirt 5 beta. And those games are, those games are more forgiving, it's safe to say, than Dirt Rally, definitely. I think, but the thing is, I don't really think it's so much of a physics thing. I think it's more of a stage design. I think Dirt Rally, especially Dirt Rally 2.0, has those really narrow, undulating, bumpy stages that just catch you out. And I think those earlier Dirt games are more forgiving, more for their stage design and environments and their physics. Their physics are more forgiving, but not that much. Like, I was driving, if you remember in Dirt 3, they had that rallycross track at the LA Coliseum. And, I was driving like a Fiesta RX whatever with like 500 or 600 horsepower. That thing was a handful. Like, especially on the tarmac. Like, there's something about, like, the tarmac handling in, like, those earlier Dirt games where it was fun, but, like, you could just spin forever, especially in those short wheelbase, high-power cars. That's not something I'm really getting out of Dirt 5. And I think some people might feel like that makes the game a little bit too easy. The way that I kind of feel about it is, like, it's one of those games where, like, it encourages you to drive like an idiot, but in a good way. Like, it encourages you to, like, pull out stupid drifts and just see how quickly and how long you could keep your foot on the ground. And, like, those things are a lot of fun, but it's not so much a game where you're going to get into situations where you're like, this car is unsavable. And the thing is, even when you do hit a wall or something in this, I think one of the most profound differences between the way a game like Dirt 5 plays and the ways that previous Dirt games played is that, we talked about this in the Grid episodes, Codemasters, even when they made the physics pretty forgiving, the crashes and the collisions weren't. They absolutely weren't.
Yeah.
You hit a wall in Grid 1 in spite of how that game handles, and you are sucked into a tire barrier and you lose a tire and you are not going anymore. Like, those games were pretty crushing in terms of collisions and damage compared to most arcade racers. This feels more like something along the lines of a Sega Rally Revo. And I say that because, like, if things get a little bit hairy and you do kind of smack into a wall, or you do drift too hard or something like that, you just bounce and you kind of keep going. And I like that. I'm fine with that. I think some people might have an issue with that, but I don't think that's, I think for the game that Dirt 5 is trying to be, that's fine. I think if you want something else, go do Rallycross at Linden Hill in Dirt Rally 2.0. That's basically my feeling on that.
Yeah, I feel like the racing experience in these arcade Dirt games, or ones that aren't Rally, sorry, because they're still kind of realistic to a certain degree, I suppose. I don't know about Dirt 5, but they've always tried to kind of bridge the Simcade line. I think the thing is, the challenge, in my opinion, shouldn't really come from trying to just handle the cars, because there are so many other titles out there already doing that. It should be in the close quarters racing, and if the physics engine plays into that and is more forgiving as a result, then I'm all for it, because at the end of the day, you want some exciting on the track racing that not only provides an incredible environment and scenery to drive through with wild weather effects and time of day and all that type of thing, but you also want it to feel as if even if you mess up, you've still got a chance of winning as long as you drive your heart out, basically. And it sounds like it's almost similar in lineage to Sega Rally Revo in that regard, where hitting a wall isn't the be all and end all. In actual fact, you can sometimes manipulate that to your advantage if you're going to use the kind of track boundaries. I'm not sure if Dirt 5 kind of goes that far with it, but it sounds like it is a bit more forgiving in terms of, like, you're going to have difficult track design, but it's not going to trip you up so substantially that it becomes a chore to drive on.
It's very much a game, at least it seems like at this stage, where, it's really keeping that momentum going. And I mean, that's what it's about, and it's kind of, and that's why I liken it to Sega Rally Revo, because you have to drive in the wrong direction in Revo to really, kill your momentum. That game, I mean, look, it's one of those things where it's like, there are some times where, like, it does actually help you to hit the wall in Revo. You generally still don't want to. You don't want to, go off your line. You don't want to drift too much, but it's that difference between a game where it's like there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things, and a game where it's like Revo, where it's like there's the right way to do things and then a bunch of different sort of modifications on that. And like the game isn't going to punish you excessively if you screw it up. Like, okay, in some of like the Masters class stuff, like, yeah, the AI can be really fast and that gets a little bit tough. But even then, you know, you're not, like you said, you're not fighting with the car. You're not even necessarily fighting with the track. You're just trying to make those small adjustments to get a little bit more speed out of certain corners and get a better line. It's not like, can I control this thing at all? It's like we've already established that I can control this. Now, can I control it a little bit better and a little bit more smoothly? That's I think what an arcade racer should be. And that's how Dirt 5 kind of feels to me at this stage. I think there's definitely a lineage there with Onrush. Some similarities I was noticing with the physics engine, and it's been a long time since I played Onrush, so it's probably like not something that I can like really go into detail on. But I think Onrush was a game where it was more like, you know, the camera was kind of pulled back. It wasn't really about the racing, so it wasn't so much like focus on your own speed and your own laps and stuff like that. You really wanted to see where everyone else was at one time. And so that kind of like took a more global view and made the racing less about those like pinpoint accurate maneuvers. And so I feel like for that reason there was maybe less sort of detail put into a physics engine in that game, because it wasn't about you so much. It was about like all of the mayhem that you were surrounded by and had to sort of work in to like succeed at your goals. Whereas this obviously is more of a conventional racing game. And so it's you know, it's taking some of the things that Onrush did, but kind of pivoting in that direction of you know, your more standard like arcade rallycross fare. And I think, you know, to its credit, it does it pretty well. The one exception from the physics standpoint that I've noticed is that there is a sprint event in this game, like a World of Outlaws style, like short track dirt oval type thing where you're driving those like go-karts with the crazy wings. It's funny because it's very much an American thing. I don't think they do this anywhere else in the world. But they do have those, and they have a track in Arizona where you drive these things, and it's basically like Northern Isle Speedway from GT Sport, but it's all dirt.
Right.
In these cars that are hilariously short wheelbase, and they have 900 horsepower in one gear, and those can be tough to control because it's basically like you're always going left and you just steer with the throttle. And so when you're in the middle of the pack and you're driving those cars, that can be pretty crazy. I enjoy it, but I think it's a bit of an acquired taste. It's actually going to take some practice.
Yeah, it sounds similar to like I think it's called Speedway, like the kind of scrambler motorbike racing on dirt ovals, where it's like they're basically just got the throttle down the whole time, but they're like kind of using the weight of the momentum to kind of go round the corners, like going left constant. Sounds like it's similar to that kind of idea. So I've got a rough idea of what you're talking about. Is that probably the most unique thing you've seen you're allowed to talk about at this point?
I mean, I'm allowed to talk about anything I've seen in the demo.
I don't know if there's anything cool that you were
it's all pretty much
back.
there. Yeah, no, not really. There's nothing that they've told us. You know, anything that we can't talk about, they didn't tell us.
Sure.
So, you know, the demo just consisted of 4 different locales. There was the Norway one I spoke about. Yeah. There was one in China. There was one in Brazil. There was the Arizona one. The sprint racing was definitely like the most unique, and it was cool because like that's a style of racing that you really don't see in racing games. Yeah. Ironically, I think the only place that you can experience anything like that today is actually in iRacing. So if you want, you can go ahead and buy like a track in the car in iRacing and try this out for yourself in a much more realistic environment. But it's fun. I was actually doing that at my friend Trevor's place because he's got iRacing and everything, and it's actually it's a laugh, and it's challenging, but it's not like that kind of typical iRacing experience where you're just like, you know, you can feel every heartbeat and you just never get a moment to breathe. It's just more of a laugh. But
I feel that with iRacing on any of the dirt like the events is just so fucking like crazy off the rails compared to the circuit offerings.
Yeah. But as far as Dirt 5 is concerned, so those were the 4 locales. There was a selection of 90s rally cars, the rally raid cars. There were super lights, which are basically like it's a class where you either can choose from like a more standard buggy or like an aerial nomad type thing. Those sprint cars. There's going to be modern rally cars. I didn't get to drive them. Those are more your R5s as opposed to like your WRC cars. Interestingly, I noticed that it doesn't seem like there are any Group B rally cars in this game, but I wonder if that's going to be DLC. What Codemasters said was that they're hoping to, so there will be at least 12 cars to release as DLC in the months and weeks after a game comes out. And while the cars will be paid, there will also be tracks, but the tracks will be free.
Fantastic.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah, that I have absolutely no bones about.
Yeah.
So that is.
I think that's something that really shocked me when I think it was Dirt Rally 2.0 when that season pass day locked locations behind paywalls and stuff, because I think it's a very much established thing now for racing game DLC. Like, you need to give the locales away for free because you don't want to kind of split the player base at all. You don't want them to have reasons they can't participate in some online events and that type of thing. And if the car offerings are good enough and unique enough, then we're always going to be kind of eager to buy that if we're enjoying the experience. So I think that's fair enough, and it worked for Drive Club certainly.
Yeah, definitely. And then funny because like as I was writing this hands-on, I realized like I don't actually know if there are going to be point-to-point rally stages in this game. So I reached out to Codemasters and they confirmed that there are. It's funny because they aren't in the demo. So, I was wondering like, oh, how is like the conventional rally going to work? And then all of a sudden I realized like, shit, is this game even going to have it? But yes, it will be there. I haven't gotten to test that out. And I mean, in that sense, if they just did something like they did with like Dirt 2 or Dirt 3, where it was just like one, they have a small selection of stages and they're not overly long, and it's just kind of a thing that you do sometimes and you're not doing like those circuit style events, and I think that's kind of all that needs to be.
Yeah. Is there anything at this point that you think is a concern at all, or is the demo pretty much like the perfect kind of starting point you feel to learn more about the game as it gets closer to release?
I think that the demo is a good starting point for like understanding the physics, understanding the kind of the way the races are going to feel, the way the weather is going to play into things. I think that's all good. My concern, and I mean Codemasters is now shedding light on this, but it's one of those things that we're really not going to be able to tell until we play the game, is kind of how the campaign's going to play out, because they're doing this kind of story mode thing. They have Troy Baker and Nolan North playing characters. They have the Donut Media guys. Honestly, some people kind of bitch and moan about like, you paid actors for the game and this is a racing game, who cares? That's not really my problem with it. I really don't have a problem with that. I'm just kind of more concerned with like the mechanics of the career mode. Like, there isn't going to be, I asked, and they said there's not really going to be any team management features, which, Dirt Rally 2.0 didn't do anything with team management features, but I did kind of, I did like the way, though, that Dirt 4 approached it, and so I kind of hoped that they would bring it back, but they didn't, so it's not really a factor. There is sort of a sponsorship kind of system where, Codemasters games forever have had this, even going back to Grid, where you sign the sponsor, you have to complete, goals for the sponsor to pay you. They'll unlock like special liveries for some of these sponsors, and they go from like, they're established brands. It's funny because they keep like kind of in all of like the marketing materials, they keep like listing some of the brands, and they're like, and Pepsi is one of the brands. It's like, okay, cool, I guess.
Pepsi Man 2 confirmed.
Pepsi Man 2 confirmed, yeah. They also say that like the liveries themselves are designed by people like Sean Bull, who, anyone who's on Instagram and follows some of those motorsport accounts knows his work, and he does some pretty good stuff. So, yeah, I mean that's great. I guess I'm just wondering, like, is this going to be sort of kind of grid of, no pun intended, but like a grid of events, and then, I sign with Pepsi. Like, is that going to be it? And then, like, every couple of races, Nolan North or Troy Baker tells me something. Like, it just seems like it could run into that problem of being a lot of window dressing for not a lot of like a mechanically interesting career. But that's something that we're just gonna have to wait and see, because that wasn't a factor in the demo I played at all.
Codemasters put out like a video they had been teasing about the story mode, and it was just basically a behind the scenes with Troy Baker and Nolan North.
Yeah, I watched that.
But yeah, so you'll know there was literally nothing of substance within it. Like, it was just sound bites, really. Like, we've never seen a story told this way before, which could literally mean anything, and I'm pretty sure every single VA says that about every game they work on. They were so amazed by the dialogue that had been put together. It was a very odd video, I felt, because I was like, for fuck's sake, is this like the Citizen Kane of racing game stories or something? Like, these guys are working on such massive AAA games, but they're amazed at the dialogue for Dirt 5.
A guy who just, rapped Last of Us Part 2, and and he's just overcome with the emotion and the storytelling of Dirt 5. I think that's something that maybe racing game developers need to maybe pay attention to, is that you're never gonna bring people in with a story in a racing game. You're not. I mean, unless you really go all in, and unless you kind of try to cultivate this, like, atmosphere in like kind of the Ridge Racer Type 4 way, where you're like, where you really make it clear to people how much like detail and care you put into the story and building this world, and you maybe were more serious about it. Because I think that's the thing, like Dirt 5 it's very fun, it's very colorful, it's very over the top. It doesn't go quite into like Fortnite territory like Onrush does, but it still has like a very lighthearted feel to it. I think that's fine, but I think with a game like that, like you're pulling people in because you're like, this is a fun racing game, not because this is a fun racing game, but really you want to be here because, Nolan North and Troy Baker say funny things when you're racing. Like, I don't think that's really gonna woo anybody. I think if you're gonna try and pull people in with a story, it just needs to be more of like kind of like a dramatic sort of serious thing, as opposed
racing
to
evolution,
whatever this is. not that, but I maintain if you just like fleshed out the R4 story a little bit, it could be like the best like single player narrative racing game of all time. I mean, as it stands now, it is, and that game barely has like anything going for it in terms of outside of like text boxes. But yeah, I don't know. It is weird. It is weird, right? The way that Codemasters is kind of approaching this, and I don't know anybody who's going to be on the fence about this game, and they're like, well, it's got the Donut Media guys, so now I have to buy it.
I think like the thing is as well, if you're going to have the story element and play it up, like the way it was announced, there was a story, and then rather than actually show a trailer that highlights what the story is, you just go straight into talking about the kind of the celebrities behind it, so to speak. I think as well that kind of indicates that the story probably isn't going to be that substantial, because if you want to get people invested in the potential for that story, I think you've kind of got to include some form of hint.
You have to set it up.
Yeah, there's nothing set up.
You have to tease it. You have to, I mean, it's like, you look at story-driven games where people legitimately care about the story, like a God of War or a Last of Us or something like that. You think about like that first trailer for The Last of Us 2 that they had showed like 2 years ago or whatever, where they were, dancing in the log cabin or wherever the hell it was, and it's just like, you're offering people a peek into a story. You're teasing some of the things that are going to happen in this game. The Codemasters has not done that for Dirt 5 because.
Yeah, exactly. There's no world. Like, there's no world building been done. I think that the key distinction is that world building is not the same as storytelling. So I think, like, if we think about Wipeout and even Ridge Racer Type 4 or the subsequent Ridge Racer games, the reason that we would be happy to see some form of narrative in those games is because there's a lot of effort being shown to us. We can actually see it, the kind of lore that's going on in the background, so a story set there makes sense. Right now in Dirt 5, we're just being kind of blindly told that there's going to be some story in a place that in a world that we don't know anything about yet, aside from the fact that Donut Media guys are there. So it's like, I'm not sure who's supposed to be excited yet, because we've not seen anything to make us excited. Like you said, the voice talent initially grabs a headline like, oh, that's interesting. But I feel as if going straight into behind the scenes before we know anything about the narrative, I think that maybe that the wires get crossed there in terms of how it should have been staggered in terms of the road to release.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hope that we hear a little bit more about to go on. They also have guest appearances apparently from Jamie Chadwick and a YouTuber named Slaptrain, who I have never heard of before. So, yeah. So, look, I think with things like this, I think it's very easy to fall into a mindset of like, oh, they got all these celebrities, who cares? Their priorities are in the wrong place. And I guess, you know, one, let's wait and see. Two, from a physics and gameplay standpoint, to me anyway, this game is making all the right noises. So, like, at least, you know, it won't be made or broken, I think, on that. It's could be made or broken on other things, but you don't have to worry about all of the other stuff, all of the celebrity stuff and all of the story stuff coming at the expense of like a poor core racing experience. I think that's the main thing to kind of quell anyone who is maybe a little bit concerned about the direction that Codemasters has taken. Like, you know, it's not like they kind of made a shell of a fake racing game and then put a story on top of it. This is a cohesive game. I think they just want to do something a little bit extra with the campaign, and you know, we'll see how it turns out.
Yep, it sounds as if the preview has been relatively glowing anyway, and it's great to hear on the physics side of things and the racing. It's the pieces are there now. We've just got to wait till it comes out.
Yep, definitely. And this is going to be an exciting year. I mean, you have Dirt 5. Before that, I mean, Dirt 5 is coming out October 5th. I believe in before the end of the summer we'll have Project Cars. And you know, we'll get Fernando on to talk about that, whether he wants to or not. He wants to. I'm just yanking his chain. But yeah, so those are going to be exciting games, and as always, there is the looming juggernaut that is Gran Turismo 7 to look forward to. So it's kind of nice to have these episodes where we actually have new racing games to look forward to, because it's so
definitely
rare.
Yeah, exactly. Because you compare what the previous 2 episodes were about, and we're jumping straight into some future racing games. It's fantastic. It's great, and the more we can do these episodes, the better, because we want to see what's coming next. We want to see real innovation in the kind of the subgenre, and more importantly, it's more racing games to play, so we can't complain.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we haven't, you know, we talked last episode about the things that we're kind of hoping for in Project Cars 3, because it just naturally ended up in the Need for Speed Shift discussion. But Need for Speed actually, you know, it's funny we had that last episode because the EA Play event happened this week, and we got to see literally like 2 seconds of some Need for Speed title. There was like a Drift 240 SX drift car and like a 911 GT3, and you know, basically we're just told Criterion's working on the next one, so we'll see that in time.
Was very. At least it looked like something that actually existed, unlike the last time Criterion was allowed to show something off at one of these events, and it was the Extreme Sports storyboard.
I wonder how far they ever got with like Beyond Cars. Like, I really just wonder, is that on a hard drive somewhere in the Criterion office? It's kind of weird to think about.
Lost media.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that basically wraps this one up. Just wondering if there are any housekeeping items. We'll put a link to Discord Live, because we should always do that every episode.
Yeah.
And if you are, you know, listening to this for the first time or something like that, you know, you can find us at time_extend on Twitter. And Bren, you've been streaming a ton. I have not gotten to your level yet, but are you an affiliate yet? Have you reached affiliate status?
Yeah, we got affiliate status last week.
Nice.
Sadly, the kind of follower that tipped it over the edge, it was offline. Somebody followed, so we didn't
Oh, no.
get to have the on-screen party fun. But I've been doing kind of Friday night streams mostly, revisiting a lot of games. The good thing is that I usually start with something, and then I don't know, it fucking crashes my GPU or something, then end up playing something else. Like last night, for example, we ended up playing. We started with Grid 2, then moved on to Dirt 3, and then we played some Grip as well. So it was like it's a random selection of games. It was good fun, and the good thing about those streams is you've been part of one of them, Adam. It's literally just having an absolute chat about nothing and having a good laugh. So it's almost very different in tone to the fantastic podcasts that we create, obviously. But it's good fun, and you also like you said, you've not been streaming that often, but the streams you have been doing have been great fun, especially the old Gran Turismo stuff.
Yeah, I need to get back into it. I've been sitting at this desk, I feel like, for 3 straight days, and I'm just worried about what's happening to my body. So I would like to stream. I just need to do it in a healthy way. I actually recently had to buy a new desk chair because this one just hurts, and my streams are just going to be, really unhappy and annoying until I get myself into a more comfortable chair. So yeah, and you are at JuiceBokes, right, on Twitter? That's the same
one, yeah.
Same thing, or not Twitter, Twitch, I mean.
Yeah, same for Twitter and Twitch. You can find me at JuiceBokes, JuiceBoax.
Nice. All right, so thanks everybody for listening to this episode, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for listening, guys.